Hey everybody, it's the OMAD Dad. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, a channel that is dedicated to living the OMAD lifestyle or eating just one meal a day. Well, I am outside for yet another beautiful 70-degree day here in New England, and I wanted to upload another video today, and I want to discuss some of the staples of my diet. And by diet, I don't mean a specific dieting plan that I follow, such as keto or Atkins or veganism or whatever the fad of the day happens to be. What I mean is the collective, overall, individual foods that make up one big collective, one big group of foods that I eat and buy almost every single week, and usually make them a part of my OMAD. Most of these foods are also on the list because they are very common and very easy to find, and also very affordable and cheap. That's one of the reasons why I buy them almost every single week, is because they're so accessible. They're almost always on sale, and even if they're not on sale, they're usually at a price point to where almost anybody can afford them. Now, obviously, my list is going to be different than yours, but I figured just to get the discussion going so you can get an idea of how I approach cooking my own meals at home and what are some of the ingredients that I'd like to have on hand, I figured this would probably be a good post for us today. So I'm going to start off. Here we go. Number one, bananas. Bananas, even if you get the ultra organic bananas, at the most I ever pay for them is like 69 cents a pound. I go to my local Aldi's, I just get regular conventional bananas, and they are, I think, around 45 cents a pound right now. They are extremely cheap. I usually buy a couple of large bunches of bananas and go through them every week as a little bit of a staple in my diet. I like having that for fruit. It's pretty much always available. My children will eat it, and at the end of my meal, if I want something a little bit sweet, I'll have a banana or two, and it just kind of, rounds me out really nicely. And as I said before, at 45 cents a pound, I mean, I could buy, several pounds of bananas, which will last me a long time, especially at the rate that we go through them here. Even though we don't make any of those hip trend smoothies with them at all, we eat them whole. That'll still last me quite a long time. So bananas are always something that you'll find in my shopping cart. Number two, potatoes. The Irish in me, perhaps, or the meat and potato northeastern kind of guy, always has meat potatoes usually, but potatoes are pretty much always very cheap. I get, occasionally when I go to the farmer's market, I'll get some of the nicer local grown potatoes, as I find they just have a better flavor. But even just the conventional potatoes that you would get at a regular grocery store, they are often very affordable. And again, I've made, often with my breakfast meals, I'll dice them up and make some home fries or a hash out of them. I'll do when I make my own French fries or roasted potatoes. Sometimes I'll even cook them, scoop out if I have extra that are cooked off, like baked potatoes, I'll scoop out the flesh, and I can even make potato gnocchi, which is a fresh pasta out of them. And that's where you really start saving some money, is if you could do something like that, which I'll show you my recipe later on in this channel for. That'll really help you stretch out the meal when you could take such a cheap ingredient like that and stretch it out to make pasta or something like that, or a filling for some pasta or some other ethnic dish. And you can feed a family of four with almost nothing. So potatoes are always in my basket. Number three, lettuce. I keep a lot of lettuce in the house because I have a pet rabbit, and we do feed her organic lettuce, but I myself love to have salads with pretty much every meal. Like growing up, that was one of the few vegetables that my parents could get me to eat pretty consistently, and I love having a big salad. Sometimes for my OMAD, it'll be a big salad with a whole bunch of fixings on it, but almost always I'll have a little bowl on the side of lettuce, and lettuce is always really cheap. It's every now and then. We just recently had the romaine lettuce scare, the big crisis of I think it was 2019, or was it the end of 2018? I don't remember. I think it was the end of 2018. Well, regardless, it seems like all the days just go by so fast, don't they? Regardless, even with that, you can always find cheap organic lettuce, and now that the weather's warming up, lettuce is super easy to grow in a home garden, and you don't even really need that much space. I have a small space for my garden in my house, and I dedicate most of that small space to lettuce because we go through it so much, and there's nothing like picking fresh lettuce off from the garden, giving it a quick rinse, and then eating it that very meal. So lettuce is always coming home with me. Number 4, chicken. You can always find chicken on sale somewhere. And it's a really good, it's a cheap protein, really good for during the week. I often buy whole chickens. I don't get them too large because I like to do, especially if I'm making like fried chicken or if I do a roast chicken, I just don't want it to take too long. Usually about a 3.5 to 4 pounder is good for me. But again, I go to Aldi's for that, and they're 95 cents a pound, regular price. And so for the price of, I think, about a 10-piece chicken nugget at McDonald's, I can get an entire chicken and eat and just roast it with a little bit of salt, pepper, maybe some herbs, put a little bit of lemon on there, slow roast it, and you have just an amazing dinner. And even if you pigged out and ate the whole thing, I mean, at $4, it's just cheap. There's no way you would be able to get that down yourself. But even if you don't get whole chickens like that, often you'll find chicken breast or chicken legs or even ground chicken on sale almost every week. There's always some store around that has it on sale, and it's a pretty reliable product to get. And of course, naturally, the next one, number 5, is going to be pork. Pork is we have this saying in the restaurant business, when in doubt, when you're having trouble meeting your food cost, when you're having trouble with a little bit of it's a slow period and you want to really make a profit, when in doubt, chicken and pork. They're always cheap, they're always available, and they're always pretty consistent. I can't say I'm a big fan of how chicken and pork is being raised in this country, especially with the big factory farms, and you could shop local. You could shop at places that sort of meet your ethical standards as far as raising and all of that, but you will pay premium for that. And the truth is unless you really have a personal relationship with the farmers and the people who work with these chickens or work with the pork products that you're going to end up buying, you really truly don't know how it's raised and how it's cared for. So is it worth the extra amount of money? I don't know. That's a decision that you have to make. But I usually always have bacon in the house. I'll get ground pork, make my own sausage mixture, sometimes for breakfast sausages, sometimes for like a sausage topping for pizza or something. And I love having a really good grilled pork chop that's been marinated. So pork and chicken, definitely 2 things you're going to see in my grocery basket as well. Now number 6 really isn't technically, you'll notice so far they've all been whole foods. And almost all of my items on my list are, except for number 6 here. It is flour. I buy several different types of flour for my house. It's not a whole food, but it's very cheap, and I can then turn it into things that I use to stretch out a meal. I make my own pizzas at home. It's very simple and it's very cheap. I buy King Arthur flour. It's the only flour I like to buy because it is not bromated, it's not bleached, and it comes from up north, just a few states away from me, so it's fairly local, and they have very, very high quality standards. Now, King Arthur flour is pretty much the most expensive flour that you're going to find on the grocery store shelves, but even so, getting a 5-pound bag of this stuff and the amount of food that you can do with it, the things that you can do with it, it still makes it a good buy, and it's in my basket. And when I give you a pantry tour of in my home at some point, I'm going to do a video on that and what I like to stock up in my pantry. I'll show you all of the different flours and things that I have, but for the most part, I have all-purpose flour. I have bread flour for when I make different loaves of bread or pizza dough. I have a self-rising flour, which is really good for making like a tempura battered chicken, or if I want to make biscuits really quickly. I have masa corn flour, instead of wheat, that's made out of corn, and I make fresh tortillas and just make some really good tacos, and it's another great way to stretch out a meal. So I think I have maybe some whole wheat flour and probably a little bit of semolina flour as well, but those are left over from other recipes and I don't really use them that often. But those other flours that I just previously mentioned, they're always stocked in my pantry. And that's the thing, folks. Like, if you have a fairly well-stocked pantry, I mean, don't turn your house into a warehouse, but if you have a fairly stocked pantry, you can prepare and whip up a really tasty, a really nice meal very quickly, and it's really not going to require that much effort. You don't have to go crazy. Like I say, just have some of the basics. And that's why I'm going over some of these lists over here, just to get you an idea of some of the things you're always going to find in my home. Number 7, canned tuna. This is another good protein source. And canned tuna is another one of those that's almost always on sale. When it is on sale, I do get a good sale. I stock up on it, and I'll use that. I'll marinate it somehow, take it out, and do like a marinade. Maybe do some tuna tacos, or or even a regular plain old tuna sandwich. I like having that as an alternative protein source. Number 8, another good protein source: eggs. Eggs are always cheap. Right now, I'm getting them at my local Aldi's for $1.25 a dozen. I know, it's pretty crazy, right? My local farmers market, where the hens are raised, I think a couple of towns over from where I live, they show up there at $6 a dozen, which is definitely a big difference. However, even if you bought the more expensive eggs, they still are a very cheap and very fast cooking, healthy protein source. I know, don't believe all of the BS in the media and the hype. They keep going back and forth saying, oh, eggs are healthy, they're not healthy, they're this. We've been eating this food for millions of years. We've been having eggs. Now all of a sudden they're no good for you, or you should avoid them. Absolutely not. I mean, I just recently watched Jacques Pepin, a famous French chef, going over this long diatribe about how much he loves eggs and how they're really a staple in the French diet. And for me personally, I usually only eat eggs as a part of my OMAD meal probably once or twice a week. So I'm not going overboard with it. And I usually prepare them in different ways. Sometimes I'll have scrambled eggs, sometimes I'll have a poached egg, sometimes I'll fry an egg and put it with something else. And then also, if I'm doing any baking, the eggs will be almost often required for that. So when I make my own junk food, so to speak, and my little treats for the week, I make sure that I have eggs on hand and almost always have to use them. So that's something to consider too. Number 9, rice. Rice is a staple in many, many cultures all around the world. It's not as big in America as I think it should be, but rice is pretty much always cheap. I don't get organic rice. I don't get the brown rice. Never really cared for brown rice at all. I get white rice, but I get several different varieties. I get a long grain white rice, which I use for making rice pilaf, or if I'm going to make like a Spanish style rice, Mexican rice. I pick up arborio rice for when I want to make risotto for Italian dishes. Very rich and creamy, but so tasty. And then I pick up jasmine rice for whenever I make an Asian dish and I want that steamed white rice like you get at Chinese takeaway places. I put that, I'll put that with my meal, and it's so easy to cook. It's so cheap, and it really will stretch out a meal for you. And I always make sure I have at least some form of rice on hand. I don't eat it every day, but I'm having rice at least once a week, every single week. So number 10, thinking of rice, number 10 is beans. Beans are another really cheap addition to your OMAD meal. They're a good protein source. They do have fiber, and they're perfect for people who are vegetarian or even vegans who are doing OMAD or time-restricted eating. My tip for you, it would be to buy them dried and let them soak overnight before you want to cook them. When you buy them dried, you get a better yield, and it's always a lower price than if you buy them in the can. However, there's nothing wrong with buying canned beans, rinsing them off a little bit, and using them, especially if you're pressed for time. Beans are there's a ton of different varieties. I like kidney beans. I usually get pinto and black beans. I always have those two at home, but occasionally I'll get like kidney beans or little cannellini beans. I always have something on hand, and once you, like I say, if you get them dried, once you soak them overnight, they're ready to go. You cook them up, and it's a really great addition, really great protein source, a great way to stretch out your OMAD meal, especially if you're on a budget. And number 11, last on the list, it's technically not a food, but it's always going to be in my shopping cart every single week, and that is distilled water. I've said before on this channel, when you have your drinks on OMAD, water has to be the number one drink that you have every day. And me personally, I want the best water that I can get, so I get the cleanest that I know possible that I know of, and that is distilled water. I probably go through about 4 or 5 gallons of distilled water a week. And I just sip on it. I keep a gallon in the refrigerator. I bring one to work with me, and I just keep sipping on it, and that helps me, especially whenever I get a hunger pang or anything like that. Again, you want a nice, really good, clean water source. I cannot stand the taste of tap water. It's loaded with a bunch of extra crap. I'm sure it's a little bit better for you than soda, but then again, in some municipalities, it probably isn't with all of the toxic crap that they put in there. But I get distilled water every single week, about 4 or 5 gallons worth. And if I need more, I get more. If I need less, well, then it carries over to the next week. But I want to have a really good, clean water source to really reap the benefits of the fasting period that we have between meals. And that is pretty much it. I have other staples that I keep in my house, like onions and garlic and little things that I can cook with. But again, when I do a separate video on my pantry, I'll give you a little tour of my pantry at home. And believe me, it's not as sexy as you think it would be. It's just a basic pantry. But there's always going to be different staples and things that I have to cook with around the house so that I can kind of put together a flavorful meal in a relatively quick amount of time, especially during the week. But during the week, my meals are pretty simple and basic, and sometimes I even repeat meals, from week to week. It's quick and simple. I can stretch out a little bit on the weekends when I have more time. But these are the 11 cheap food staples that I always have on my OMAD plan. I'd love to hear some of the foods that you like to eat every single week and what you like to keep in your pantry and what you like to bring home from the grocery store in the comment section below. You can even send me an email if you'd like. I'd love to hear from you guys. That is it for me today, though. I hope you're having a great week. I hope you're having a very happy OMAD. And of course, be well.